matter. And they really fucking matter. There's like 4 things that matter. And they really fucking matter. I mean, objectively. I mean, you should care. Especially you. If you thought about it for 5 fucking minutes.
Welcome to episode 36 of the Out of Horses podcast. As always, we are your hosts, Keem and Esmè.
Yay!
So we're recording this show a little early because some of us are going out of town.
Yay!
And we're also recording this the day after what some people call Columbus Day. Other people, we're moving toward. It seems we're moving towards Indigenous Peoples Day, which is a lot better. But let's start by saying fuck Christopher Columbus. Yeah, I said it. And just the caveat of us recording early, there are probably going to be some news stories we're going to miss during the week.
Yeah.
So if we're behind, we're behind. We'll have to talk about those next week. Anyway, speaking of news, let's get into the news.
Let's do.
And just to let you know, this is probably not a warning you need to, but I'm coming in hot today. So when it gets to yeah, it's gonna be fun again.
Everyone is surprised. Yep.
All right, Esmè, start us off.
All right. So for those of you who are paying attention to all of the wonderful, wonderful alt-right rallies that are happening around the country lately, you may have noticed that Richard Spencer, the eminently punchable neo-Nazi who appears to be traveling around the country just inviting us to punch him at this point, he is fresh off this week off another march in Charlottesville. He and his supporters, followers, something, just, because something like that, just because we haven't had enough of this, dressed up in their khakis and their polo shirts, and some of them were wearing suits just to class up the place a little bit, with their tiki torches, and walked and marched around Charlottesville protesting again this weekend. Just for fun, I think.
Funsies.
Just for funsies. Which, based on how well that turned out for them last time, you would think that they would, change their strategy or something. But it appears that they're not done with this one yet, where they return to Charlottesville to do the same thing. And there are several similar events, including one that was originally called Unite the Right 2.0, which they have now changed. I think they changed it to White Lives Matter, actually. I think that's what they changed it to because that's somehow less inflammatory. I don't know.
They didn't change it because it was less inflammatory. They changed it. They knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah, right? Yeah. But in any case, that event is happening in Shelbyville, Tennessee, on the 28th. So if you're in Memphis and you're listening to this and you want to go protest, please let me know because I can't go by myself. That's just dumb. Right? That's not safe, and I want to be safe. So, if you want to go with me, let me know. But
that also goes with the any of our. I know we have people in Nashville who listen.
Yes.
Nashville people. Also, you can get in contact with Esmè and link up.
Yes, but I want to go in a group because going by yourself to one of these things. For those of you who don't know, going by yourself to one of these things, especially one that is explicitly modeled after the protest in Charlottesville, that did get so violent, that did get so dangerous, right? Do not go to one of those by yourself. Make sure that you've got a network of people with you. Make sure that people know where you are and what you're doing. Make sure that you have the supplies that you need to make sure that you get out of that safely. Prepare for tear gas. Prepare for all these things, right? Don't go into it unprepared because you don't know how, especially with one of these events, you don't know how the police are going to react. You don't know how the people that you're there protesting are going to act. They are armed, and you don't know what exactly they're armed with, right? Like they are definitely carrying guns, but they may also have some kind of like mace or pepper spray or tear gas. No, they wouldn't have tear gas. I don't think it's legal to have tear gas as a civilian, but they'll definitely have something. So prepare for it.
You think these people care about legality?
I do, actually, because one of their things that they're so blah 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 about is, look at us, we're not doing anything wrong except for arguing our free speech, right? Like a lot of except for exercising our right to free speech. A lot of them are trying really hard to stay technically lawful so that they can continue to claim that they're not doing anything wrong.
Yeah, but I mean, being visibly lawful doesn't mean you're actually lawful.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what that's what I'm saying. Like, believe legality doesn't really mean anything to them, besides strictly on the surface. So be prepared for anything.
Yeah. But in any case, so that's my thing, right? Is this is not over. They are continuing to do these things in Charlottesville and elsewhere, right? So
and
be aware.
They're only looking to expand. They're expanding. Like,
they are
not only
expanding.
they're not over, it's getting bigger.
Yes.
So, be prepared. And speaking of Charlottesville, which brings me into my story, and as I said, prepare yourselves, I'm coming in hot. So, it's been all over the news, especially when Charlottesville happened, but the very visible beating of a young black man by some of the alt-right protesters that, of course, made the rounds. Mm-hmm. It was recorded, pictures were taken, everything, like visibly beating a black counter-protester. This week, it was announced that a arrest warrant had been issued for the young man, DeAndre Harris, on an unlawful wounding charge stemming from the incident.
Yeah, I was going to say accident.
Yeah. So, I'm going to let that sink in for a minute. Alt-right protesters beat a young man. Multiple people beat down one person, first of all. Violently. Because you can't beat somebody non-violently.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So, multiple people beat up a young counter-protester who was counter-protesting peacefully. And one of them filed a charge of injury against the person they beat. None of these people were charged, but the man they beat is being arrested.
Which is some fucking bullshit.
Which is some absolute fucking bullshit. So this is the, and I'm about to start a spiel because, fuck you, I'm doing it.
Good, do it.
This is the country we live in. Black people. I'm gonna start with us first. If you're one of the black people out there that still doesn't realize that still thinks that it's all going to be okay, that there's not a lot of problems, that we literally aren't, like, that war literally isn't being waged on us right now, then you gotta get with the picture. Because the world we're living in, the country we're living in right now, is a country where black people are being gunned down by police. Unarmed, innocent, being gunned down by police. Also, before it even goes to this, combine this arrest warrant with the fact that I can't remember which one of the multitude of shootings that have been publicized. I don't remember which one it was. The police officer that was acquitted of murder of an unarmed black man, once again, is suing that family for defamation. So this cop murders someone, and I am using that word, murders someone, gets away with it, and is suing the family because somehow they ruined his life.
Obviously.
This is the world we're living in. Police are killing us. That's just happening, and it's continuing to happen.
And
They're killing us.
It's been happening for a long time.
It's been happening. Oh, it's very much been happening. So we're being murdered. So what can we do? We protest peacefully. We kneel, and we kneel when the national anthem plays, and they call us unpatriotic. They call us traitors. They tell us to go back to Africa. And of course, everyone's favorite, get up nigger, or you dumb nigger, or all that bullshit. So you protest peacefully. That doesn't fucking work. You get called all kinds of shit. You go out and march. We create movements to try to show people that we deserve the right to be human. To be human. To be considered equal as everyone else. To have our lives mean something. To have our lives not be taken away at a moment's notice. And still, with all that, we do it peacefully. We go out and just get our points over. We march. We come together purely to save our own lives, to save our own humanity. And then they label us as terrorists. That really happened. That really is going on right now.
Yep.
I talked about it last week. Black identity extremists. Yes, now we are terrorists for defending our humanity, for defending our lives, for saying we deserve to live. We are terrorists. Okay? And now, as you can see, when people who are trying to kill us, who advocate our genocide, because that's what these alt-right people are advocating. They're not advocating to, quote-unquote, save America. They're advocating the death, the destruction of groups of people. And it's not even just black people. It's queer people. It's Mexicans. It's Asians. Anyone who isn't white. They're Jewish people, too.
Anyone who isn't white and Christian.
Right, and white and Christian. They're advocating our genocide. They are saying that we should be wiped off the face of this planet. They're saying that we are, not only are we not human, but we're not even worth life, general life. And they can beat us. They can attack us. Get away with it, and then we are the ones that will get arrested for it. Mm-hmm. If you do not realize that we are at war right now, that war is being waged on us, then you will never get it. This is not something we can just sit and wait for. This is not something we can pray about. This is not something we can sit and ask for. Because the longer we sit and the longer we wait and the longer we don't fight back harder, these things are going to get worse over and over and over again. We can't keep doing this. And we can't live in fear. I've been afraid. I've been afraid for a long time. But I refuse to be afraid anymore. If this is how we're going to be treated in this country, then fuck it, I'm gonna fight for it. I'm gonna fight against it as hard as I fucking can.
Yes.
And coming off of Columbus Day, you want to get real? We want to get real about something. We built this country. Blood, sweat, servitude. Our lives were sacrificed. Our lives were given. We were destroyed. We were ripped apart. Our blood drenches the soil of this country. And I'll be damned if today I'm going to sit back and be treated as something less than human. I'll be damned if I'm treated like something less than everyone else, just because of the color of my skin.
Yes.
So anybody out there listening, and I told you I was coming in hot. Anybody out here listening who understands what I'm talking about, and even if you don't, get on the train. It's time to start striking back and striking back hard in what way you can. Because let's face it, you're already a terrorist anyway, according to the FBI. So you might as well fight as hard as you can. Because at this point, it's do or die.
Yeah.
And personally, I don't feel like dying right now. So that was my thing.
Yes. That's a good thing.
I do apologize, Esmè, for kind of taking that for a second.
Why the fuck would you apologize for that, Gandhi?
I'm not apologizing for saying it, but I mean, we are co-hosts of the show.
Okay.
So if you wanted to add anything.
Nah. You got this.
But yeah, so that was my story. That was my news story. That was my statement. That's my statement for the whole show today.
All right, you heard it. Let's wrap this up.
Which is going to move us into our topic segment where we'll be discussing professionalism and respectability politics.
Yes.
Which plays right into what I was just talking about. But so we're going to get on to that after a short musical interlude for our musical guest for the week. Enjoy.
Mannequins unaware that they decay, rotting behind polished windows, choking through mouths closed tied by molten wax, talking shit to a god that they don't know. Everything we say means so much less. Unaware of those who know us best. Fashioning X-flames from synthetic parts, fucking what we thought we once knew, peering out of eyes sewn tight by broken glass, talking shit to a god that they don't love. Their lines of science must not cross. Whoa, thank God our
And welcome back. Thank you to our musical guests for providing that music as we move into our topic. So, our topic is something that both Esmè and I have to deal with a lot. Something I'm sure, I know we both have very, very strong opinions about.
Yes.
So, Esmè, I'm actually going to let you start it off. So let's go for it.
All right. So today we are talking about. So we're segueing into respectability politics, but we're doing this specifically like through the lens of professionalism, particularly professionalism with regards to dress code and appearance, in the workplace, in the schools, in all of those places, right? And understandably, I have very strong opinions about this. As a person who is like assigned female at birth, presented female, still do mostly present female, more or less, but I identify now as gender nonconforming. And that's reflected in my style of dress and in my grooming habits, as in I don't remove my body hair. And that affects the kinds of clothes that I wear and the professionalism with regards to what I wear. I also, for those of you who have not yet figured this out, I'm going to go ahead and say it. I teach in a public school and have to deal with various levels of professionalism and dress code with regards to that. And I do see it. In Memphis, I see it less than you hear about it in the news, but there are still instances of policing, not only quote unquote appropriate dress code especially for like young women, right? But also appropriate policing appropriate grooming and fashion for young Black women, right? To where I have had discussions with my colleagues at other schools about what to do, like how to deal with this student's hair, right? I'm like, as long as it's not hanging in her face, right, I don't have a problem with it. And they're like, but it's red. Okay, it's red. But it's in braids. Okay, it's in braids. Shut the fuck up. But, so, there are so many different ways that this topic is used to make people fit into this really, really rigid, like, standard for what is and is not appropriate in school, what is and is not appropriate in the workplace, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
All right. And added on to this, there was, Esmè, I don't know if you remember, but there was a court case in the past year where the court decided that a business could fire a African American woman for basically wearing her hair naturally and in dreads. I remember the dreads being a part of it too. So basically, a business could fire her for not having her hair, straight. So even the courts are stepping in to enforce hair and dress to tell people what is acceptable for them, telling them how it's acceptable for what is acceptable for them to look like.
Yes.
And in regards of Black women, in this case, you can't look like you're Black.
Yeah.
You can't have you can't present in a way that is culturally authentic, which is, of course, garbage. I know. So growing up, respectability politics as was always a huge deal. You had to look and act a certain way to be considered acceptable as a young black man or a young black boy. So I learned to dress a certain way. It wasn't too long. I mean, my closet is still mostly polos, but wasn't too long ago where I had nothing but polos and button-up shirts because anything else was said to look thuggy.
Oh, heaven forbid.
Yeah, of course. I remember going on with this. I remember I was job searching, and there was a job for, I think a guy was cleaning carpets, and I didn't apply for the job. I didn't apply for the job because the job description said this. This is a job cleaning carpets. Okay, this wasn't like an office job. This wasn't a job where you're going to be like, this is not like quote unquote upscale. You're not going to really be interacting with a whole bunch of people. Mm-hmm. The job description said no one with any visible tattoos, no dreads, no braids, hair must be short, so basically no afros. I'm trying to remember all the things, but basically what it boiled down to was no black guys. Just basically anything that could possibly denote African American in culture, none of that was allowed. To clean carpets, because the ad said it was unprofessional to clean carpets.
Which is some bullshit.
Which is exactly some bullshit. But this is the things we have to deal with. This is the things, like, we have to deal with, like anyone has to deal with when they're outside of the mainstream quote unquote norm.
Yeah.
I know.
Which, I mean, gets exactly to the point of it, right? Which is that in America, normal means white, middle class, Anglo-Saxon, like WASPs, right? White, middle class, like Christian, male, straight.
Right.
That's what normal is, right? And reflected in all of these quote-unquote professional dress codes is the centering of those people and their experiences and their, for lack of a better word, heritage, right?
Right.
Professional dress codes mean that everyone needs to conform to a white European standard of dress.
Right.
Right? The three-piece suit came out of Europe. It did. And anything that deviates from that, especially in a professional office environment, anything that deviates from that culturally or gender-wise is at risk of being unprofessional. Even in women's professional dress, right? Like, there are two acceptable options, right? There's the skirt suit and then there's the pantsuit, both of which are just a feminized version of this same outfit.
Right. You have to for women you have to stick with the as we called it in history class, it's the cult of white womanhood.
Yes.
So yeah.
Right. And as a woman in a professional office environment, you're trying to be more, quote unquote, more masculine, right? To fit in with this notion that the workplace is a male space, right?
Right.
By even being there, you're deviating from what ideal womanhood is. And so you want to dress then the appropriate way to dress is to dress more masculine. However, you don't want to dress too masculine because then you run the risk of being seen as some kind of deviant who cross dresses. So you have to wear this feminized version of this outfit, right? A feminized version of a suit, but not an actual suit, but also not too feminine because the workplace is no place for a woman. Right.
It's so amazing to me with these standards of what is professional. Even facial hair is really not considered professional.
Yes.
Like the things that naturally grow on your face.
Yep.
Not considered professional. And that's some of the dumbest shit in the world. But when these nice, these frat boys who were unable to grow facial hair in college, they just had some patches because whatever. But when they get out into the work field, they can walk right into a job because they automatically they're professional. Look at them.
Yeah.
Just look at them. It's insanity. Another random job story. So, years ago, when I was in college and I didn't need a job at the time, but I was going to get some extra money. I applied to work at Chick-fil-A. And I know, guys, I fuck Chick-fil-A. You just fuck them.
Yep.
For all the reasons, okay? But I was in college, needed some extra money, so yeah, applied for Chick-fil-A. They were hiring. Got there, filled the application, everything was going great. Got called back for an interview and stuff. One of Chick-fil-A's, I don't know if it's still the rule, but the rule at the time was no facial hair. Because
in a food service industry, though, that makes sense to me.
No, but it wasn't for that reason.
Okay.
It was in their guide because it was not professional for the workplace.
No, see, that's some bullshit.
Yes.
Right? If they were claiming that it was too difficult to maintain like hygienic food preparation space, okay, that argument will make sense to me, right? Because human beings shed hair, right? And there's stuff for that, there's beard nets, but I can get that, right? But if they're citing that it's unprofessional, that's some bullshit.
Oh yeah, no, it was definitely on there that it was unprofessional.
Yeah, that's some bullshit.
I mean, I've literally heard people that because going back to the white Christian standard, I've heard people say that beards were unchristian. I've heard that be said before.
Wait.
Yes.
Wait.
Yes.
What?
Yes.
No.
And
really?
And my reply to this person, as I remember the person at the time, it was back in high school. My reply to this person was, but dot dot dot. Jesus had a beard.
Yeah.
Dot dot dot.
The fuck? Yo, really?
Yes.
Fucking hell. What is wrong with people?
Absolute insanity. Oh my God. But yeah, no, the standards that they impose on how we're supposed to look in order to even get the most menial of jobs, the most menial of tasks, is fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll say it not only goes to the that WASP standard of dress,
Yeah.
but it also goes to the idea that American society must be uniform.
Yes.
Like their self-expression in just like any way. And this is not even just like specifically for like, it's not just in specifically like white society. All over the place. Self-expression, anything that isn't like standard, any kind of deviation from the standard is not acceptable.
Yeah.
Like even in the black community, you can't look a certain way and still be considered okay, still be considered black enough, and that's not okay. Like as much as humans are social creatures, we are not uniform creatures. No human being is the same. No human being is going to express themselves in the same way. That's impossible. And expecting humans to all be uniform, to all look and express the same, is a standard that cannot happen. Like, it's not possible. And there are societies around the world that impose uniformity, and those societies suffer for it.
Yeah.
Like that's one of the reasons Japan's suicide rate is so high.
Yeah.
Like that kind of imposed uniformity is dangerous.
Yeah. And that sort of gets into one of the things that I wanted to talk about specifically from my perspective, right? So there's, like I said, there's a few different ways that we're approaching this, one of which is based on like race and cultural identity, right? Wherein anything that deviates from whiteness, from like white Europeanness, is considered unprofessional and unacceptable. But the other approach that I wanted to take with this in particular was like with regards to gender identity and gender presentation, because like getting into that like deviance is unacceptable, right? That's enforced even more heavily when it starts getting into now not only are you deviating from the norm, but like this particular kind of deviance from the norm is also seen as a perversion, right? It's not just that you're not normal, it's that you're disgusting, right? And that goes in particular with people who are assigned male at birth, who are presenting in a more feminine way. They are opening themselves up not only to being considered unprofessional, but also to violence, right? which is really horrifying, right? This is the kind of this particular norm is enforced throughout society with violence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just with the violence of the workplace, like imposing itself upon you and your expression, but also literal, actual physical violence, which is still, it's horrifying. It's horrifying how many trans women, is particularly trans women of color, right? These things intersect, but how many trans women are still face like actual violence for presenting as in the way that makes them most comfortable.
Right. But that's the thing. That's always been the thing in human history. It's that anything that deviates,
yes,
anything that deviates should be destroyed, should be killed.
Yeah.
You talked about the intersecting nature and of it all, and I talked earlier in the news segment about the police shootings. One of the biggest excuses for the killing of African American men, women, all across the board, it's that it's the way they look.
Yes.
How they were dressed, and how you are dressed immediately signifies your value, and that value, in the case of a lot of people, your people of color, your trans, your queer people, all across the board,
mm-hmm.
that value is nothing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's say yeah one more time.
Yeah.
We're cutting that. That's getting cut.
Says you.
But of course, that should not be the case. Like,
I mean,
obviously, how like that has how what you wear, how you present yourself, should have no impact on the value of your life as a person.
Right.
Especially, and I'm going to go back to Charlottesville for a minute, especially when you have white supremacists marching the streets in Nazi uniforms.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that now there have been instances where these people have gotten reported and lost their jobs, but it's not because of what they wore and how they presented themselves. It's because you're advocating genocide, and you can't really represent a company you're working with if you advocate genocide.
I mean,
it's kind of a
here's
thing.
hoping.
But so many of these white men get to go out and dress up as Nazis and do all these very visible, very awful things, and they get to go right back to their jobs. They get to go right back to their lives the next day. But for people of color, for queer people, just expressing yourself in a non-harmful way puts you at risk for unemployment, your whole life being destroyed.
Yeah.
And we talked about this on the show like a couple times. Well, one, the Trump administration is pushing back anti-LGBT discrimination laws.
Yeah.
I mean, so they're making it easier for employers to fire queer people for the way they look.
Well, I mean, in a whole lot of places, like, there's not a ton of protection about that anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, the ones that were there are being pushed back because there were some federal protections put in place during the Obama administration.
Yeah.
But those are being rolled back. In Mississippi, House Bill, I can't remember the number on it, House Bill whatever that we talked about on a few shows back.
Was it
more than a few shows.
1652 or something like that? I could be totally wrong. Don't quote me on it.
I think it's 1652 or 3 or something like that.
Don't quote me
something with a 3 in it. It just went into place, making it legal for businesses to discriminate against people on the grounds of religious freedom, which we all know what that means.
Right. It means that I could put on my jeans and my binder and my button-down shirt that I wear all the time and my boots and go to a place in Mississippi and have them refuse to serve me because I am dressed in a way that marks me as different.
Right.
Even when any man, any like assigned, like anybody perceived as male, because I'm perceived as female, right? Gender identity notwithstanding, right? Like I am perceived as female and choosing a masculine gender expression, and that marks me as different. Whereas the actual clothes that I'm wearing, nobody could have any argument about those items of clothing on somebody that reads male.
Right.
Ugh.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yes.
And I mean, we're coming from a black and queer perspective, but we can look at it for our Muslim friends.
Yeah.
I think it was I know it's in Florida. As a matter of fact, in northern Florida, there have been bans on hijabs.
Mm-hmm.
There have been in a lot of places there are bans on Muslim headdress. You can't work in certain places and observe your religious dress. But somehow it's still okay for somehow all the rest of us have to observe your white Christian dress code.
Yeah.
Where's the fairness in that? All right, there isn't any, because you don't give a shit about fairness. You give a shit about keeping people like you and people who look like you, dress like you, and think like you in power where you think they're supposed to be. And you want to take everybody that looks different and you want to put them off into a corner so you don't have to look at them.
Yeah.
Because they're scary.
Yeah. One thing that's occurring to me as we go through this, especially in light of the recent the alt-right, quote unquote alt-right, right, the white supremacists' current approach to protesting, right, is how much this professional, quote unquote professional dress code is used as a shield, right?
Right.
Which for a long time, this kind of dress code has been used as a shield if you are already deviating from what is considered normal, right? If you're black, if you are a woman, if you are queer, right? Like putting on this uniform can deflect some of the criticism and some of the heat, right? Like a black man putting on a suit is more likely to be considered safe because he's trying, right? Like he's visibly marking himself as trying to fit into what is considered normal, right?
Well, I actually, hold on. I got something to say about that one.
Yes.
Because the old adage remains, if a black man is wearing a suit, he's only going to one of two places, to church or to court.
Yeah.
So, you know, even when we wear the uniform, we have a issue.
Yeah. And so like that's why I said like is more likely to be considered safe, right? Like because now there are and that gets into like the politics of like even like actual politics, right? Like that's one of the arguments that people make when they start claiming that America is post-racial is, oh, we had a black president, right? We had somebody put on a suit and go be the face of our country for a while, and that is supposed to magically fix all the problems because he was whatever. Anyway, but somebody who is different can put on that uniform and deflect some of the criticism. Right? You go into interview for a job wearing a polo shirt. If you, right, as a black man go to a job interview in a polo shirt and khakis, you're more likely to get it than if you showed up in like your jeans sagged and your forces and your t-shirt and all that, right? It marks you as trying to fit into what is quote unquote acceptable, right? But even the white supremacists are having to use this shield lately, right? That's why they showed up in polo shirts and khakis to march. That's why so many of them over the weekend, when Richard Spencer led the recap or whatever, not the recap, the
remix?
Yeah, whatever. That's why so many of them were wearing suits, right? Because they can point to that and say, look how normal we were being, right? Like, look how professional, look how responsible, look how all of this we were being. It's a visible marker that they're trying to do that because anything other than that has been painted as like as deviating from the ideal, right? It's a whole thing.
Because Nazis never wore suits, and that's how you could tell they were Nazis. That's how you could tell they were bad guys in World War II. They never wore suits.
Never ever.
My Lord, it's exhausting, is what it is.
Yes.
It's infuriating and exhausting. And back to black people, because I want to talk to black people for a minute. We have a really bad habit as a community of taking these things imposed upon us and just continuing to impose them. You mentioned sagging earlier.
Yeah.
Now, for years, there's always been a thing on black people just and sagging, like, that's what's wrong with these kids now. They're sagging and blah, 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 and whatever. Personally, I'm not going to sag because it's a little cumbersome. I need more movement. You know?
I know that's the thing that it never made sense to me about sagging, right? Like I see kids walking down the street, like literally holding their pants up with their hands, and I'm like, that seems really impractical.
Right. I mean,
like, dude, you can't do anything with your left hand because your hand is holding your pants up. That's what your belt is supposed to do.
It's not practical. It's not practical, and it looks. I mean, to me, it looks a little bit ridiculous. But that's to me.
I made a kid laugh the other day by telling him that if he meant for us all to see his underwear, he should probably make sure it didn't clash with his shirt so badly.
That's a little funny.
And he thought it was hilarious, and then he pulled his pants up.
That's funny.
No, for real though, his shirt was green, and it was like a green and like kind of pink pattern, and his underwear was bright blue. And I'm like, dude, that looks tacky as all hell. Like, coordinate if you mean for this to happen. Seriously.
Get your fashion together. Like, step your fashion game up. You don't sag, just step it up. Just make sure you don't clash. Get your shit together.
Yes.
But with that being said, we as black people, we continue to impose these like standards on it, and I used to be like I used to look down on people for sagging. And I know so many black people who still very much will look down upon a young man, and in most cases a young man, for sagging. But now I'm just like, if how you wear your pants doesn't denote your, as I said earlier, your value as a person.
Yeah.
In the 90s, people wore their pants backwards, inside out, one pant leg up, one pant leg down. There has been, in the 70s, you had bell bottoms. And have you seen the shit in the 80s? It looked like somebody threw up glitter. They threw up a galaxy on some leather pants, all right? But this is all expression. These are all just expression. It doesn't denote anything other than this person wants to dress like this.
Yeah.
And that should not be held against them. Like, that should not say anything about their value. Son, if you want to sag, sag. I don't care. I ain't gonna do it. Sag. I may not think it looks good. You do it. Lady, if you want to come out in, who knows? Like, if you want to come out in a short dress or whatever, with the little under part of your booty hanging out the end of it, may not be my bag, but you do it. That's you. I'm not gonna think you're less. And I want to add something to queer black people, more specifically black women, or and usually black lesbians who present more masculine. That is a huge, like, black people will judge the hell out of a masculine black lesbian. And that is so stupid. So stupid.
Weirdly, so as somebody who spends time with a lot of black teenagers, weirdly, that like this group of teenagers that's coming up, not so much with the judgment.
Oh no, I will say the younger generations are becoming more and more accepting, because they're it's more and more visible now. And
also, here's the thing that gets into like the gender discrepancy. I have students who have no thoughts. They will not say a single thing about a young woman who is dressing masculine, but they will judge the fuck out of a little femme gay dude. Oh my God.
I was actually about to get into that one next.
Oh my God. Like, will you shut up and just let him do his thing, please? He's not hurting you. Like, holy Christ, guys. Chill out.
And see, and that bullshit, that bullshit causes people, and I know so many personally, that causes so many people to be in denial of their sexuality.
Yeah.
In the closet. That leads to so many just really, really messed up issues. I had a cousin who, man, I'm going to say that boy because I'm country and we say boy. That boy was like, from the moment we were children, we all just knew and assumed that he was homosexual because you could tell. It was something that was obvious, and the kids who grew up around him, we didn't care. We didn't, because that's how he was. That's how he always was. And we loved him. He was our cousin, you know?
Yeah.
But as he got older and began to present himself more, those limitations, those things started being posed back against him to the point where he would basically he was trying to not be homosexual.
Yeah.
Which led to some very messed up and very just bad situations. Like, he got kicked out of school eventually because he was caught kissing a young man. His father would actually go to church and preach, dress him up in his suit and stuff, and then go on and preach about how homosexuality was wrong and blah, blah, blah. And it was awful. It was absolutely awful. I honestly don't know where he is now. I certainly hope things have been better for him.
Yeah.
That's all I can ever hope for. But things weren't until people started telling him what he was supposed to be and how he was supposed to look and how he was supposed to present himself. Things weren't so ridiculous. It still messes with me, very much so.
Well, understandably, right? Like, this kind of arbitrary decision as to what kind of dress is and is not appropriate. So, you keep saying, like, the way that you dress has no bearing on your value as a person, which is true, right? But I feel like one of the things that we've kind of glossed over so far is how style of dress particular fashions are used to communicate information about you as a person, right? Like me in the body that I am in, dressing in a masculine way, for better or for worse, does communicate information about who I am and what my gender identity is, right? It communicates information about my gender and my sexuality, right? Dress can be an incredibly powerful marker for being part of particular social groups, right? You can communicate queerness, you can communicate gang affiliation, you can communicate, right, sports fandom, right? You can communicate a lot of different things about yourself with the clothing that you choose. But you're right, though, that it does not matter what you are wearing and how it is perceived by the people who look at you. That does not make your life less.
Right.
It does not make your life less valuable. I don't care. I don't care if you are communicating something about I don't care if you're communicating to me that you're a member of a gang because you're a member of a gang. That does not make you less of a human being, and it does not make your life any less valuable. And it does not provide an excuse for somebody to commit an act of violence on you unless it is legitimately actually self-defense.
Right. It's you. Like no one has the right. No one has the right to tell you how to be you. No one has the right to tell you what is acceptable for you to be. You have that freedom, or you're supposed to have that freedom. And yeah, sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that we are at a moment in America right now where it's time to expand what it means to. It's time to expand professionalism outside of outside of appearance, right?
Right.
It's time to expand it outside of some arbitrary box for your appearance and put the emphasis more on how you act and how you treat other people, right?
Right.
To where you can show up in a hijab and be professional and not have people look at you sideways. You can show up with your visible tattoos and have it be professional because you are behaving in a professional way, right? It's time to make it so that a person who is assigned male can show up in makeup or a skirt and have that be professional, right? It's time to break these boxes and make the emphasis be on behavior and outcome and not so much about this ridiculous appearance, right? Because this emphasis on appearance, first off, it's extremely arbitrary, right? Like what is and is not professional, right? The difference between professional and not can be boiled down to like the height of a heel, right? Or how dark your eyeliner is, or like the cut of your jacket, right? There are so many arbitrary lines drawn. And I forget where I was going with this. And it's arbitrary and it's cultural and gender-based violence. It is, right? You are erasing parts of people's cultures through force and coercion to make them align more closely to some arbitrary standard, which is white, hetero, male Christianness. Right. By enforcing these rules for professionalism, you're erasing people's cultural identity, you're erasing people's gender, you're erasing people's queerness, you're erasing these things by force and coercion. Right? You are telling people that we cannot hire you, we cannot provide you with the means of survival if you don't conform to this standard, which is a violent act. You are denying people's basic needs unless they conform to whatever this arbitrary standard is that you have chosen, which is, it's idiotic and it's unethical and it's violent. And we need to stop pretending that it's not. We need to stop saying, oh, well, that's just how it is, right? Oh, that's just how whatever, right? No, it's violent. It's violent and it's unethical, and stop doing it.
Right. Depriving anyone of life or livelihood based on arbitrary, very arbitrary parameters.
Yeah.
Is a violent act.
Yes.
And that's something that needs to be remembered.
Right. And not just depriving them of livelihood based on something arbitrary, right? Like depriving them of their livelihood unless they erase parts of their own identity, unless they suppress parts of their own identity to conform to your arbitrary standard.
Right.
So, stop doing it.
Stop.
Right? Somebody's religious headwear has nothing to do with their ability to do a job. Somebody's cultural costuming, right? If you want to, if a woman of Indian descent shows up in a sari, right, has nothing to do with her ability to do the job, right? A trans or non-binary person shows up in clothing that you don't think fits the gender that you perceive them to be. Too bad. It doesn't have any goddamn thing to do with their ability to do the fucking job, right? A person shows up with visible tattoos. Does not affect their ability. Or dyed hair, right? One of the things that I got into a discussion with one of my colleagues about, so the field that I teach in is one where I put teenagers up in front of audiences pretty regularly. And one of my colleagues said, "Oh, well, this girl came in the week before the performance with her hair in red braids." And I'm like, "And so?" They're like, "Well, how would you deal with that?" I'd say, "Well, fix it so that it doesn't hang in your face, because I want to see your face during this," right? Like, it doesn't have anything to do with her ability to do the thing that I'm asking her to do, right? And who am I to tell her that she can't do this thing that she wants to do with her hair because of some arbitrary standard that I have? Like, that's stupid. She doesn't need to make her hair conform to what I think her hair should do in order to do the thing that I'm asking her to do. She can do it perfectly fine on her own, right? Without me nitpicking about what her hair looks like. I don't care.
That actually reminds me, and this is going to be my final story of the topic segment.
Okay.
I was on the internet, and it was a discussion about people with tattoos and how unprofessional it was. And they showed a picture of this guy who was covered in very, very visible tattoos. And there was this whole thread about how he would never get a job, and even going so far as to say he was probably not a good father, and all this stuff and all that. And then I kindly went and found another picture of this man and his family, because this guy was a very public figure. Mm-hmm. He was one of the founders of a company called Rooster Teeth, which is a multi-million-dollar media company that makes movies, TV shows, video games, all this content. And I was just like, so this guy is unprofessional. This guy is probably a bad father. This guy founded a multi-million-dollar company. This guy also has a loving family where his daughter is like extremely intelligent, but it was all you guys' opinion of this man. But because he had tattoos, he was covered in tattoos, that he couldn't be anything.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and the guy is an army vet. Is a army vet. Like all this stuff, but no, he couldn't. He couldn't be. There's no possible way he could be professional and a good father and a good person because of his tattoos.
Yeah.
Fuck you, internet.
Yep, internet sucks. So guys, stop focusing on people's appearance and think about how they are acting, right? Their professionalism is your ability to represent the company well and the ability to do your job in a professional way. Does not actually have any, despite what all these conservative white people think, your ability to represent your company well has nothing to do with how you're dressed. It actually doesn't, right? You can represent your company well, dressed in whatever. So that's my thing. Stop it.
And I want to say, and for people who are feeling, everyone who's feeling, oppressed by these ridiculous standards, in the end, be you.
Yeah.
Fuck them. Like, be who you are. It doesn't. It matters what they think, but it doesn't. Like.
But again, Keem, like that glosses over the fact that for a lot of people, conforming to some kind of arbitrary standard like this is necessary to preserve their livelihood, right? Like, it's all well and good to say fuck them, but guys, do what you need to do. Do what you need to do. Don't go putting your livelihood in jeopardy necessarily, right? You are the only one who knows if that is the decision that's right for you.
Right? Yeah, that's Make the right decision. Make the right decision for you.
Make the choice that you need to make. But also, we're going to keep working to break down these stupid ass professionalism standards so that it doesn't matter. That's my goal.
I would like to apologize because I'm very confrontational, and I'm very much the person who goes, you know what, fuck it, and I just go at shit. Like, so do what's good for you. Like, do what you need to survive.
Yes.
Because even if you can't be like, fuck it right now, I'll be like, fuck it for you.
Yes.
Look, says the guy who hopes to be a lawyer. This is going to be a really fun next couple of years.
Yep, you're going to have fun. All right. I think I've said my piece.
I think we are finished, so we're going to move on to our sex segment, which once again, I have no idea what Esmè is going to talk about, so it should be interesting. All of this after another short musical interlude from our artist of the week. Enjoy.
Welcome back, everyone, to the sex segment. This one is going to be a pretty quick one because I realized as I was thinking through some of the things that I am considering talking to y'all about that I should probably clear up some definitions before we get into too many of these things. So the one thing that I wanted to bring up and make sure that everybody is clear on is what is exactly the difference between kink, fetish, and BDSM? So what do you say, Keem?
I'm supposed to answer that?
You're always supposed to answer it.
And
give me some input.
We've learned that my answer is usually wrong.
Exactly. You give me a platform. You give me a platform with which to correct your misconceptions.
Okay, let me think. So BDSM. I'm gonna start with the one that's an acronym.
Yeah.
BDSM stands for bondage.
Yeah.
I always forget the D. But I think the S and M is sadism and masochism.
Yes. Well. Yes.
Yes.
Well. Mostly.
The D. I don't know the D.
Okay.
But that's like basically like erotic practices involving those things.
Not necessarily, though.
Okay. Hold on, let me see. Let me see if I can get something.
Okay.
For the rest of them, and so that's that.
Okay.
Kink is like the spectrum of things that like BDSM is like part of the kink spectrum, but kink could like encompass things like other things like leather, because leather doesn't have to be in BDSM. It could be its own separate thing, or like furries and like kink is like a whole spectrum of like things, and it doesn't have to be sexual.
No, not quite.
Okay. What was the other one you said?
Fetish. Yes.
All right. A fetish is, I think, fetish does have to be sexual, right?
Yes.
Like fetish is like centering on like specific things for a sexual nature.
Okay. So you're
Like-
you're kind of right. You're kind of right, but partially wrong too. As usual. You're like on the right track, but you're not quite there. So where do you want me to start? No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to start with BDSM. Let's go back and do them in the same order that you did them in.
That I failed to define them properly in.
Yes. So
Okay.
BDSM is an acronym. You're right. It is a little bit more confusing than you were trying to make it, though. So BDSM. Some of these letters have multiple meanings, which is why it gets a little confusing. So the B is bondage, right? B is bondage.
Right.
The D can stand for discipline, and some people even group it like bondage and discipline, which I think is dumb because those are two very different things that sometimes go together, but they don't have to, and I hate grouping them together as if they go together all the time because that's dumb. Because I personally practice bondage without practicing discipline. Like, that is not part of my repertoire hardly at all, right? Anyway, so bondage, discipline. DS can also stand for dominance and submission. And then SM is sadism and masochism. Right? And then if you break that down into what these actually refer to, there's like this is an incredibly broad spectrum of potential practices that's encompassed in these four letters, right? So bondage obviously is like restraint of like physical restraint of a person, but there's so many different ways to do that, right? Discipline, it's the same thing. Discipline there's so many different ways to do that, some of which also play into the next one, which is dominance and submission, right? Which is at its heart a power play, right? Where there's a dominant partner and a submissive partner, that now there's an incredibly broad spectrum of how seriously that is taken, right? All the way from dominance and submission, like explicitly only during sex, all the way, or explicitly only during this kind of play or that kind of play or whatever, but then all the way up through like 24/7 lifestyle DS people, right? To where this is in practice all of the time. Right. There's an incredibly broad, and there's lots of different ways to enact that too. Right. There's a lot of extremely formal, like systems of codes and rules about DS, right, that you can find and that you could potentially learn and buy into and become initiated in. That gets really, really intense for some of them. And then sadism and masochism obviously deals with pain. Right, the dishing out or the receiving of pain. But yeah, so BDSM, and you're right though that BDSM is often considered part of kink, right? Although there are a lot of people, we'll get into in a second what kink. So let's do that. Kink does refer specifically to unusual sexual practices. Right?
Okay.
So that's where your misconception was there. Kink does refer specifically to sexual practices, especially unusual sexual practices. So a lot of the things that you mentioned, right, with leather, with furries, with BDSM, those are considered like kink or kink adjacent things, but a lot of them, leather sort of, but definitely furries, right, can be approached in a way that isn't actually a kink, right? Like it is possible to be like a person who enjoys dressing up in fursuits for non-sexual reasons, right? And that doesn't make it a kink for you, right? It's just an activity or a hobby that you enjoy doing. It doesn't, if there's no sexual component of that for you, then it's not a kink. It's just a hobby.
I do have a question. You said
Yes.
like basically non-traditional, like non-usual sexual practices.
Yes.
What does that like? And you may not be able to give me a like great definition of this. I don't know if that's even possible, but what qualifies as non-usual? Because there's some usual things that I do that a lot of people wouldn't consider non-usual.
Wait, like what?
Well, I mean, okay, does usual just mean like, all right, does usual just mean like straight hetero, like but straight hetero basic question mark?
So straight hetero, no, though, right? Like,
Okay.
because I mean, otherwise, there's no way to be a queer person or an LGBT person and vanilla, right? Which
Okay.
I have had this argument with a person.
That's
Right.
actually what I was wondering, because I was like, because that moves anything that's not like straight head into the realm of kink, and that seemed like a super broad term at that point.
Yeah, no, right. So there. This is kind of like a sort of define your own thing, right? To where like maybe like there's some places in the middle there where some people would call it a kink and some people would not call it a kink, right? But like no, right? Like straight heterosexual is not necessarily like the boundary for what is and is not kink, right? But yeah, so but then you get into also like this is where like BDSM and kink overlap a little bit, where some people overlap their BDSM and their kink, right? Like the reason that they engage in one or more of these activities under BDSM is for a sexual purpose, right? To where like with me particularly, or with me in for example, I'm not to say me particularly, but for example, right? Like I really enjoy bondage, and historically I enjoy bondage in a sexual context, right? I don't do a lot of unless I'm practicing or something. I don't do a lot of bondage outside of an explicitly sexual context, just because those things go together, right? I find particularly rope bondage extremely erotic and extremely hot, right? In a sexual context. But I know that there are people, and I have met some people and talked to them for whom rope is explicitly not a sexual thing, right? They do the same activities that I do, or not the same activities. They make the same ties that I do, some of them much better than I do them, right? On the surface, it looks the same, except the motivation for doing it and then what happens after is very different, right? Even though we're doing the same activity, we are doing it for a very different reason. And so BDSM and kink, there's an overlap there, but they are not the same thing.
Right. Okay.
Does that make a little bit more sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. And kink can so part of what kink is, right? Like unusual or unconventional sexual practices is when you find sexual energy, sexual arousal in things or in activities that wouldn't seem hot to somebody without that kink, right? So like there's some really like different kinds of like objectification, like what's the word for it? Fornophilia. Do you know what fornophilia is?
No.
It's finding sexual pleasure in being used as furniture.
What?
So like as a footstool or a table, right? Or as a chair. And you find that actually like sexually arousing, right?
Well, that's a new one. That's definitely a new one for me.
Right? And it's not something that I'm into, but it's really interesting, right? Or one that has popped up on one of the blogs that I follow is I don't even remember what they call it, but cake sitting.
What?
Which is exactly like what it sounds like, right? Like you are where somebody with this kink is sexually aroused by the act of sitting on a cake.
Sitting on a cake.
Yes, sitting on a cake, right? Which is certainly unconventional, right? So that's kind of what it means. And there's like a little bit of like weird, like I said, there's a little bit of weird gray area between what might be considered a kink. Somebody might consider it a kink, but another person would not. But that's kind of where that boundary is. Like it's kind of a gray, fuzzy place where this boundary is.
Okay. So just a side note.
Yes.
We should do a show on like not commonly known kinks, because that's interesting.
I'm not sure if I am qualified to talk on that one quite yet.
Well, we shall find someone.
Yes. Let us do that. But
Listeners.
So we've got one more word. Oh, do your pitch.
Yes.
Do your pitch.
I would say, listeners, find us someone, or if you are someone that can come on and talk to us about like kinks that are not very commonly known, get in contact with us and come on the show.
Yes.
Because I want to know. Like, I'm super giddy right now. I want to know.
Yes. Also, if I am wrong on any of this stuff, y'all, please feel free to correct me. Right? I am not so married to being right that I am going to resist correction. If I'm wrong, please correct me.
Yes. Call Esmè out.
Yes, please do.
Because I can't a lot.
Yes. So we have one more word though,
Let's go.
which is fetish. And so I've heard, so kink and fetish are certainly related. Again, these are all related terms, but there's some differences, and I've heard the differences explained in different ways. One of which is that a fetish goes beyond what a kink is, to the point where it is difficult or impossible to achieve arousal without this object or situation being in place, right? To where it goes beyond being aroused by something, and to the point where you can't be aroused without it. And that's one of the ways that I have heard that explained. Another one is that, and I'm not sure if I completely agree with this one, but if you know more about this than I do, please feel free to weigh in, to our listeners as well as to Keem, which is that kink is used as a means of increasing intimacy with a partner, right? Like it's specifically a partnered activity with the intention of increasing that bond and strengthening the bond. Whereas fetish is something that can happen without a partner, right? Fetish replaces the need for a partner.
All right.
It's an ability to have it provides that ability to have an incredibly powerful sexual attraction, sexual thing without another human needed, right? And that's where you start getting into things like really problematic, like racial fetishes and stuff,
Right.
to where you are, and to use a common example, right? Like a white man and an Asian woman, or an East Asian woman, Japanese typically, or Korean or whatever, right? To where this person, this man, is not actually with this woman because of who she is. He is with her because of things that he perceives about her, right? He has depersonalized her and reduced her to an idea. And that is what he's attracted to. He's not actually attracted to her as a person.
Fetishism oftentimes runs into objectification.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, fetishism, especially when you're dealing with another person. No, whether or not you're dealing with another person is really, really difficult to separate from objectification, because you are reducing the. It's because you are focused on an object of your desire, right? If there's another person involved, you are dehumanizing them and reducing them to this object of your fetish. Whereas kink is necessarily like something that you do with a partner, right? Which may involve objectification, right? There's a variety, like including fornophilia, right? There's a variety of kinks that rely on objectification in various ways, right? There's fornophilia. There's a doll one where partners derive, or like where you derive sexual pleasure from dressing up a partner as a doll, or from acting as a doll for your partner, right? To the point where you don't move on your own. Like these are things that you can play with objectification, but it's not non-consensually objectifying a partner. Whereas fetishism can get into that. Right.
And side note, we are in the future. We have a show planned on fetishism.
Yes.
So we're going to get more into that deeper on another show.
Yes.
So
yes.
Okay, go on.
Right, and so I think, based on my impression of this, right, and what I know about it, like it is potentially possible to enact and to satisfy your fetish in a way that is consensual, right? So, like, if you have a foot fetish, right, like you can find partners who are willing to help you engage in that. There's a way to do it consensually for many of them. But in order for that to be a thing, you have to communicate very, very clearly with your partner about how, like, what that is and why you like it, and how, like, and to be respectful of their boundaries, right? Like, don't go doing things non-consensually. So, yes, kink, fetish, and BDSM.
Well, thank you for that vocabulary lesson and filling us in on those definitions.
Yes, and like I said, guys, if you take issue with any of my definitions, please feel free to correct me. I need to learn also, as well as our listeners. If you correct me, we will correct ourselves on the next episode.
All right. Well, that looks like it's the end of the sex segment.
Yay!
And thus the end of this week's show. Thank you all for listening. As always, we are very thankful for the people who do tune in and listen to our show. And if it's your first time listening, thank you, and come back next time.
Yes, please.
And go listen to our other stuff. Love us. Special thanks to our musical guest this week. It was excellent as always. Trying to think what else. Oh, as we say at the end of every show, if you'd like to come talk to us, just get in contact with us. We can see if we can't have you on the show. If you're a local artist, we have been starving for artists lately. So if you know someone that's a local musician that would like to have the music featured, please contact us. Let us know so we can feature them on the show. We can do interviews with them. We can just play their music for people to hear. We want to help as much as possible, and we want to hear new music. Links in the description as well. Trying to think of anything else. I think that's it. So, Esmè, unless you have any problem with us ending.
No, we're good.
All right. So this has been episode 36. As always, it has been Keem and Esmè, and we are out.
But there are these things that matter, and they really fucking matter. There's like 4 things that matter, and they really fucking matter. I mean, objectively, I mean, you should care, especially you, if you thought about it for 5 fucking minutes.